Boerne Independent School District. We do have a quorum. We have Joe Tidwell, Christy Schmidt, Rich Senna, myself, Carlin Fryer, and Maritza Gonzalez Cooper. Jessica Davila is on the way, and Garrett Wilson is also on the way. They'll be here shortly. So next item would be any visitor comments and testimonials, and I believe we have none. So we'll move on to budget workshop, and Dr. Kraft, turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for a special workshop. As a reminder, this is our second workshop for budget preparations. The first time was back in February 5th, and Wes took us through assumptions, the timing, and just provided big picture overviews. So tonight we're going to have Dr. Howard share updates from her area on staffing and compensation. And then as a reminder, we have the next meeting on Tuesday, April 2nd. That one's at 5 o'clock. And Ms. Flores will be leading that session for us.
Oops. All righty, so this is not our usual to talk in a mic at workshop, so bear with me because I might break into song. Not really. I just wanted to make sure that everybody you should have 3 sets of handouts tonight that will hopefully assist you in some of the information that I'll be presenting here. Just as a start off for us, let's make sure we're doing this one to match that one. Just as a reminder, tonight's conversation circles us back around our strategic pillars, which are for human capital and fiscal responsibility. I want to hop right in, and we're going to be talking about enrollment, our student staffing ratios. We will be talking about pay comparisons for teachers in the region and where we're trending against our competition. And then we're going to start talking about what a possible increase might look like for us next year. And then we'll close out with just a time for you to give me some feedback and guidance of what types of packages you might want me to start prepare for consideration. So let's go ahead and kick off here and talk a little bit about our enrollment numbers. You can see, and I did drop off 18-19, but we have seen over 1,800 students enter the district in the past 5 years. Really have had very consistent growth. We did have a massive dip in 2021 and did not meet our expectations there. That was COVID year, and so you'll be hearing about that forever and ever. But while it remains on our tracking, just to give you some context of why that year came in low. And then this year, we are also projecting lower than what we were hoping to get at for our budget projections that we went off last year. So we're currently sitting today, as of actually last Friday, it was 10,953 students. And we are projecting right now for next year and I won't even talk about the high projection, but moderate at 11,169 and low with an enrollment of 11,037. Sir? Yes. I don't want to attempt to even guess at that, but we have had great graduation rates this year from the campus. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So even though we will fall short this year, I don't think we're not quite at a place where I think we're regressing in any sense of the word. We are still growing in our enrollment, and because of that, we still need staff to teach them. So I want to transition the conversation from our enrollment to what it takes to actually staff a classroom here in the district. Our staffing ratios, you may recall that during the COVID rebound, we did drop our ratios at pre-K and kinder significantly. One of the decisions we made is academically to keep our pre-Ks in alignment with state standards. It's not a mandate, it is standard for 15-1. That means that there's 15 little babies in there with one teacher, but we, on top of that, also staff 2 aides to our pre-K classrooms. We have learned and found that these students do come to us with great need. And because of that, just some of the day-to-day feeding and toileting, that all takes extra hands. So we have been able to do that for our pre-K units and help keep those numbers relatively low. We did take our kinder back up this past year, not this year, but the last year we went back up. We did lower it to 18 to 1 during the COVID rebound, but we did take them back to 22 to 1 last year. So we're back in our second year of maintaining the 22 to 1, which keeps them in line with all first through fourth grade. Fifth grade, we take them up to 25 to 1, and 6th through 12th is also 25 to 1. I continue to put on this list the counselors because we are one of the very few districts in the state that continue to try to adhere as close as possible to the 300 to 1. And in support of that, we've also taken some measures to at least create some positions that will allow us to float counselors in the district to support, especially at elementary. When you think you only have one counselor at an elementary school, the amount of just that mental health support, not just the academic support that the campus needs, continues to grow at our elementaries. Sir. Yeah, some good things that we have done, and I really want to attribute Ms. Flores' leadership for this, is to strongly advocate for our dual credit, our AP teachers, our on-ramp teachers, and our Algebra 1 teachers. So we do have stipends that are paid to these groups of employees because the instruction for these classes is a little more unique. You would think that Algebra 1 should just be a straight across the board, but the reality is that that's a really big transition time for a lot of our teenagers. And so when you think of all of the just the transitioning to high school and maybe some of the other pressures of being a teenager, that with learning new math, it's different for them. And so those teachers tend to have a lot of kids in their classes, and they're very rambunctious. So we've provided that Algebra 1 stipend for retention. Dual credit, one of the things I really want to remind everybody about that we've been able to do successfully is that we give a $1,500 stipend per semester for these individuals to provide dual credit teaching for us. It used to be that teachers would vie for those sections because the district was just doing a pass-through payment from the either community college or university straight to the teacher. And so you would get some teachers that would really monopolize the schedule, and they would be getting these exorbitant stipends, and then their peers would not be because they only picked up one section, or maybe their section collapsed and then those kids got pulled over. So this really equitized across the board, and it also created a lot of consistency with how we're scheduling these kids. And so we're really trying to make sure that that even though a teacher is dual credit certified, that they're not just teaching dual credit, but maybe leveling out with some of those lower classes as well. And so that's helped. And then we've built in for on-ramps, though it's not a dual credit program, we still pay on-ramps $1,000 to provide that service for us. So, but I'd like to speak to specifically that you mentioned a classroom with 35 students, and in no form or fashion is that acceptable or the norm. Okay, there's a lot of things that influence the staffing to teacher ratio. In secondary, it gets a little more complicated because we may have only a person or two people that are certified to teach a certain content area, and that might barrel up. Definitely when we know about those, I always try to look at them. Dr. O'Hare and I monitor those very closely. We actually are about to sit with principals to make sure that we preemptively do the work so that going into next year, that we know they're going in at or below. Normal staffing, when I say 25 to 1, the reality is that we can consistently, we might have, let's say we have 4 teachers, one of them might actually have a few sections that are 28 to 1 or 24 to 1, but the general average should be 25 to 1. Right now at the high schools, I'm a little concerned because at Champion High School, I believe we have a 19 to 1, and at Boerne High, a 20 to 1 average. So if I've got a class with 35, that's concerning. Yep. Yep. Available to them. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Right. The right section. Yeah. Yeah. Times to offer it. Okay. So again, just so that you're aware, and these are memorialized each year in our staffing guidelines. As you all are aware, we have an internal operating document that drives all of our staffing, how we staff for each school and campus. All right, the big conversation, teacher pay. I've opted to give you the regional comparison districts that we have given you last year and the year before versus the PASA group, because we found that we're not really in competition with PASA. We're in competition with the local area to lose our teachers. And so PASA groups were giving us comparable districts, but they were across the state and we weren't necessarily losing teachers. And so Mr. Senna had asked at one point if we could really, what are we losing to Alamo Heights is really the conversation. And so I would like for you to see, this is the 23-24 data. This is not going into 24-25, but this is the current, what was published for school districts as part of our TASB reporting. You can see there that Judson ISD is ranking in the top for all areas pretty much of 0 to 20 year. They really pulled a fast one last year and pulled out ahead of Northside, and that was not expected but timed very well, and they were able to get that through. So you can also see that we had, prior to 3 years ago, we were at least in 5th or 6th place. Notice where we are today. And it is at the point where I believe that we really do have to start considering what we're looking at. But you can see we are lowest now in 10 to 20 years. When I arrived in the district, we were highest paid in those areas. Now, something very unique, though we may be lowest paid in these areas, you can see that we still have our employees that stay with us longer than most places, right? So there is somewhat of a balance between being in a good environment to teach in. These teachers feel supported. They've got great professional development. But that tenure is shifting out of the district. And for those of you that have participated in our legacy banquet, we are getting smaller and smaller groups of retirees because those people are leaving, they're gone. And so we have now that more fluid base that if we can keep them to 10 years, it's going to be a miracle. And so I am concerned because we do see here between the 10 to 20 year mark, 0 to 3 years, you're going to see them come and go. If you got them at 5 years, these are career educators. If you got them at 10 years, those are quality educators. And that's what we want to start doing, is making sure that this group does not continue to fall far behind. So I just wanted to make sure you have this. This is also in your handout, so if you would like to reference it later, you may. And for more of a visual, I just wanted to give you, I'm not sure if it shows up very well on this slide, but just there's our dotted line of who we are. That line right below us is Comal ISD. And you know, they're in a different situation, extreme fast growth. They're building buildings left and right, but they are not able to keep their teachers because of pay issues there. So you can kind of take a look at that and just give you an idea. For a while there, we were doing really great to have a straight trajectory. Remember, linear is the way we want to go. We don't want to see dips in that line. When you start seeing dips in that line and us falling far below the top 5, those are the times where we need to start really looking at things. Just as a reminder, the 24-25 year will be the next time we go through a total compensation review with the state, and we'll be able to better consider some of those things and hopefully be in a better financial situation at that time too. Okay. Sir. We'll do a TASB. Yes, sir. Yep. Yes, you could. You could. Wes, do you have a number right off the top? It's, I'm going to just give a ballpark, and I will not say this is a final number. We're close to the 2 mil mark. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep. And we can talk a little bit more about that through the process. Yes, we have, and I will just let you know that data is now just recently come out that we are starting to lag again in some of our athletic stipends, fine arts. So when you think about the hours these folks put in with these kids, the stipends they don't touch it with a 10-foot pole, but when we continue to fall further behind other districts. Yeah, what we're looking at here is just base pay. It's not our stipend structure. Okay. Yeah, it will be. Those usually go hand in hand. Okay. And I'm happy to share that report with you, the stipends report, so that you can have an idea of what we're looking at. But again, this is just a base salary conversation. Okay. And now we want to talk a little bit about increased scenarios. I felt it a good idea this year to share with you 2 documents. The first one is going to be this 8.5 by 14 spreadsheet. Because what I did here is I wanted to show you by pay band and each pay grade within a pay band. So when I talk about pay bands, I'm talking about employee groups: auxiliary, paraprofessional, and professional, not including the teacher, nurses, and librarians, even though they're on their own step at the top. And what I wanted to show you this year was what it would cost to give an increase to that certain group of employees at 1%, 1.5%, 2%, and 2.5%. Historically, for the past 5 years, the district has given a flat, straight across the board increase. Okay, we have gone from everywhere from 1% all the way up to 3.5%. Okay, based on the information Mr. Scott shared with us in the last budget workshop, I felt it was important that you had some options in considering before we actually started making formal administrative recommendations. You'll also notice that this document will show you exclusively how many employees are in each pay grade. And then I took it a step further and I've provided you, and this is published, so it's, none of this is a mystery, but also by pay grade, which employees fall into those groups. So for example, when you're looking at any of our auxiliary pay grades, we call them AUs 1 through 9 or 1 through 8. You will see which employees exactly fall into those pay bands, okay? And so when you're looking at this spreadsheet and I say that it's only going to cost, or impact about 100 employees in AU01, now you know I'm really talking about your food service workers and your custodians, your bus monitors, okay? That works the same way for all the other pay groups, paraprofessional and professionals, just so you can kind of have a better idea of what I was considering when I looked at all of this information. But on this screen there, you're going to see whole groups, not broken up by pay grades. Okay, so this is the whole group of employees. Additionally, for paraprofessionals, there had been some discussion about what would it look like if we gave auxiliary and paraprofessionals a $2 an hour flat increase across the board. That would be not in addition to a midpoint increase. I put that amount there for you as well as on this spreadsheet for consideration. Are there any questions how I come to that increase amount that would be of assistance to you all? So again, just as a reminder, our pay grades are structured as a low, a midpoint, and a high for the range. And so what I do is I take a percentage of the midpoint, not the employee's salary. So it's not like if they got, if they're making $14 an hour, I base it on yours, and then I base it on yours. It's on the midpoint. So everybody in that same pay grade would get the exact same increase. That is, of course, unless you all direct otherwise. Okay? So this information is just for you to kind of start considering as we're going to go into a discussion a little bit later. And then the last slide I wanted to share with you all is for the, this will be the salary increases amounts, kind of truncated all of this on one single page for you so you can see by area. And then the last page there would be for benefits. We're not even at a place to discuss. There's not any changes that we're anticipating, but we never know. And so right now I just wanted to show what our current contributions are from the district and what the employee portion is remaining on the different plan options. Just remember that we continue to differentiate, which is amazing for our employees, especially when you think about the employee child, that they get a little extra help than maybe just the employee only. And the district was so generous to grant that. I think we're going on 3 years now that they've had that opportunity to have a little bit more in their contribution at each level that they, based on their plan election. So again, when we think of total compensation increases, we do want to be realistic and consider that if you are directing at any point for us to consider an increase to benefits and an increase to salary, that would be a total compensation increase. I would bring in one fell swoop. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Kraft and to Mr. Fryer for any discussion, and I am eager to take notes so that I might best know how to serve you with some packages and some feedback.
Well, as we know with the board, like one of your biggest top priorities is adopting the budget. I've been doing well over 30 listen and learns, and I'm asking every group the same 5 questions. And the last question is, if you were in my shoes and could set the most important priority for the district, what would it be? And PTOs are, there's a trend with the PTOs saying high quality teacher. Make sure that we have a high quality teacher in every classroom. And the trends with the staff, their comments all center around retention and compensation. So just know that this is on everyone's mind. Superintendents all across the state are diving into budget conversations and looking at the future of what's happening in their district. Every day we're seeing headlines in the newspapers with districts facing much dire budget scenarios than we are. But I just look forward to the conversation on compensation.
I'll open it up to board members for questions and comments.
When we had the 1% increase, and I'm going to think, Wes, was that 21, 22? It was right after COVID. That seems about right. We started trending backwards then, okay? We have opted to give mid-year incentives versus actually giving an increase. And we always say, as generous as that is, and we are so grateful, that doesn't attribute to their salary. And so it actually, we fall further behind because it's not reflecting in the actual base salary. So reportable to TRS basically. And it's a one-time, it's not recurring for those employees or any of the employees. So those are the 2 things that push us back. But what's happened is that some of the surrounding districts, for example, North Side, Northeast may have, I know San Antonio has, but they've also given a mid-year increase, which is not the same as an incentive, right? Saying, okay, we knew we had this much money to start, but then we opted to give an adjustment mid-year. And so they've pushed us past the envelope. We also saw very viciously last year that districts were announcing like, hey, we're going to do this 2%. And then what did Judson do? They announced 2%, but then Judson came right back at board decision-making time, and they went above and beyond. And they did that knowing that they were going to get a competitive edge, right? So when we are the first to announce an increase, it's almost always negative for us because then the neighbors start upping the ante. But we're all over each other already. I was just telling Dr. Tidwell that TASB just did a unofficial survey for us, but we were already on the HR pipeline like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And none of us are actually honest in those conversations because we're nervous, but we're trying to get that feel. The conversation that is out right now is 2%, and I've only talked to 4 other districts, but whether that actually comes to fruition, I don't know.
Well, I might add a little bit to that, and this is more of an editorial comment. A lot of districts in the state of Texas did not use their COVID money from the federal government in as responsible way as we did. We had, on a revenue per student basis, ESSER funding much less than the average district in Texas. We used it on interventionists, we used it on tutoring, we used it on things that catch kids up. And guess what happened? They caught up while the lag still continues. But there are many districts in the state that used COVID money to give raises out, and they were warned not to, were they not, Wes? They were warned not to do that. And they did it anyway because they were banking on the state giving a big boost to public ed in this past session, which did not happen. So Canutillo, which is a smaller district than us by quite a bit, has a $6 million deficit because they used an optimistic budget that accounted on increased state funding that never materialized. The same thing for a lot of other districts in the state. And before this meeting started, I just went online and in 10 minutes, Googled, there's 15 districts that I could find that have deficits as big as $180 million. And quite honestly, they're just not financially responsible. So part of that increased gap, I believe, is because of play money, and we're not in that position right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, I was talking to a trustee from Northeast just a little bit ago, and so we already have a $30 million deficit. If we do any raises, that's just going to increase the deficit. Well, that's really interesting. We'll see what they do. North Side's in the same boat. San Antonio ISD is in the same boat. What I find interesting, though, is that for every one teacher we lose to North Side, we hire like 5 or 6. And I think, to your point, Dr. Howard, it's environment, it's quality, it's training, it's development. But we can't take advantage of that. We have to be competitive. But what I see, and I really appreciate you doing this work, what I see with this is an opportunity to get really creative this year. And we've always in the past done the same percentage across the board. And I really don't think that strategy will be effective this year because we have certain positions, whether it's bus drivers, custodians, food service workers, that need more than a 2.5% raise, because that's 30, 40 cents an hour. And when you do the math, that's just not a lot of money. These are the people that are struggling to pay their rent and put food on the table. So based on where I think our revenue is going to stand, I think we have an opportunity to do some really good things. Not that I want to, because I would never vote for Bernie Sanders, but I think he was onto something with the $15 an hour, income, right, Joe? Joe's laughing.
I'm not quoting Bernie Sanders.
So in any event, I mean, I think we have an opportunity there, and I would just encourage us to be creative and to say, well, if a pay grade is already at $22 an hour, maybe they don't need as big a raise, and because everyone wants to get a raise, but utilize some of that savings to really bring up the folks where we're having, and you'll know better than anybody, where we're having a hard time recruiting and retaining. So I would suggest we focus on where we have a hard time recruiting and retaining, and focus on those jobs and really try to get them up to a level of being competitive,
So to speak to that for recruiting and retaining, I want to start first because it's in the classrooms. So we continue to struggle to hire bilingual certified teachers, special education teachers, and dual credit certified teachers. Those continue to be very difficult for us to staff. I've had a couple of campuses that have had vacancies almost off and on throughout the year. We'll get them staffed, and then we lose them because somebody else can give them a stipend of 4,000 or whatever. 3,500 for dual language, 0 for special education. So our life skills teachers, our behavior teachers, we lose them in a heartbeat here because they can go get $2,500 at the neighbors who touch us. Okay. Yes. For specialized units, yes, to some degree. So those are in the classroom. And again, dual credit will always be hard for us. We continue to do things to counteract, for example, grow within. I have been in discussions and continue to explore ideas with Ms. Flores about dual credit teachers. Short of paying for people's degrees, we're going to have to come up with some creative ways to get people certified for dual credit. And outside of the classroom, despite what you might believe or hear, the highest need right now is for custodial staff. We continue to have shortages. I believe Mr. Stahl can assist me, but we're over 23 positions short in custodians right now. And I've not been able to touch that with a 10-foot pole. We go to workforce, so we work closely with the Texas Workforce Commission, the Council for Alamo area. So that's Alamo or Bexar County and the surrounding counties. We participate in 2 job fairs with them a year, and even 1 in addition here, and have yielded 3 hires for that, because usually the folks that can make it to the Alamo Dome for a job fair can't make it out here for a job paying $13 an hour. So we continue to see very high turnover with that employee group. I'm not going to make light of it when you can go work at Whataburger and make $16 an hour and you're only starting here at 13. There's a big gap. And then aside from that, from our custodians, our food service workers, and then our bus drivers, those are the hardest to staff positions in the district as we speak. So I know that San Antonio ISD, Judson ISD have higher student to staffing ratios in secondary than we have. I would not know right off the top of my head for any of the others, but I'd be happy to get that information for you. Yeah. So there are state mandates which we meet, but we do things like pre-K because it's what's best for kids. And we continue to have done things what's best for kids versus, really the state says we can go up, especially at that secondary. We choose not to, and held the line on that. I wouldn't see a reason why we need to move away from that. Not at this point. We're not in that situation. I haven't heard a teacher say you can pay them enough to have 35 kids in a classroom. So, yeah. Good
Doctor, I had
question.
a couple of questions. Do we know the number of, I'm thinking about the tenure, the 10, 15, and 20-year teachers, the numbers in each of those brackets? And I'm not saying we need to be at the top, but to get us back into a middle range, what kind of financial impact would it be if the focus in what Dr. Kraft is hearing is high quality educators in the classroom and retention? Those seem to be the 3 areas where we should focus to me. And what kind of impact it would be to get us into the middle range there? Maybe as a
I'll be
follow-up?
happy to prepare that for you, just so that you're aware and you can have some expectation. That is your largest employee group. And so it would be substantial. That might be something you might want to consider if you have more in 5 years, more in 10 years versus the 20-year. But remember what you do to the pay band, to the whole step scale. When you pick a year here and there, then we're compressing those years in between, which means at some point next year, maybe when we go through the TASB study, we would have to do some equitization to get them all back in line. So you keep that line linear, but I will bring that report to y'all.
Just curious about
Yes,
that.
sir. That's a great question.
Again, and the real purpose of that is focusing on what we're hearing. So, and I should have written the second question down. um, I know what it is. So we have traditionally done the teacher retention distributions, for lack of a better word, right before we let out for Christmas. Is there anything in, I know we don't have it probably without the TASB study, but a total compensation package recap that any of these salary or consulting firms can provide? Because if we've got a stipend here and we've got what we contribute for insurance here and we've got retention for Christmas here, plus your salary, I don't think the charts or just salary are a full picture of what the compensation is, plus what we spend on professional development, which was a huge focus, I think, 3 years ago. Everybody was complaining that we didn't have enough, and so I think we've put a lot of funds into that. Just what that might look like.
And would you like that back in like a one-pager?
Yeah, or just is it available now?
It is available.
Okay.
It would not be difficult for me to consolidate for you to one page.
It might help to specify where the stipends their add-on positions or voted on by the board as stipend.
So and so the data that I will give you that speaks exclusively to stipends is what's part of the published compensation plan, not in addition to what they are getting for any type of mid-year. So yeah, I can give you that. Not a problem.
I will say that. I will say this much, that because I kind of dig into the whole benefits thing each year. That being my business, I would say 7-8 years ago, of the neighboring districts, we were near the bottom of what we contributed, and now we are above average. Particularly with families and children and that area, which employee with children is a quarter of our enrollees. So I think we've made a huge stride in that area, Carlin, which would reflect what you just asked, the total compensation.
And I'll make sure to include that. It's a good point to note right now that most of the districts we are touching, so our salary comparison group, are already over 100 for employee contribution. So that's not something to balk at. So I'll make sure that's reflected as well.
Do we have any leeway to do merit-based pay? We don't do any type of merit-based pay, do we? It's just based on time, right?
For the record, can somebody take out Mr. Wilson?
Is that a bad question?
Public school and public education is not funded for merit-based pay. There are some programs that the state has continued to push out. I'll speak exclusively as the teacher incentive allotment. That is a performance pay structure that would essentially allow a district to pass through money from the state to teachers, but there's a lot of fringe work that goes around that. So it's one, it's not necessarily direct pass through. Two, we have to set up internal structures. Now we have been and continue to have exploratory discussions with our staff. We've not yet received great buy-in from teachers on this, but there are merit monies available. I can tell you right now, from just an administrative perspective, to bring a program like that into Boerne and for it to be implemented with fidelity, my office would not be able to manage it alone. It's a massive undertaking. But yes, there are monies out there, and Mr. Scott reminds me each year that those are monies lost to us. But when I also have to consider cost and workload and what it takes to manage a program like that, even for the teachers themselves that are competing for that money, the work involved for them to provide evidence for that incentive is significant.
So what, like on these minimum, midpoint, maximum, the only thing that is putting people in that, different places of that range is just, they're at 1 year versus 4 years. That's it.
Correct. So, and historically in education, you're paid on experience and not on quality of work.
So we need to try to be consistent across every year of experience, correct? Is that what I'm hearing? So to get would be the first year to retain outside, like what Carlin was saying. But if we did decide 1 year, 5 year, 1 year, 10 year, 3 year, 5 year, whatever it may be, we would have to back pay all of those other experience. No?
No, what that does is it creates what's called compression. And unless you tell me I need to equitize it, I would not do that in those scenarios. So each year there's a certain amount of people that after we give increases and stuff, we see that there's compression in their pay band. And so I will issue what are called equity adjustments. That means that they're falling behind others, which means that if we hired somebody with like experience, they would likely get paid more, okay? So you create compression, and a pay system can tolerate that for a certain amount of time, all right? But then eventually what happens is that we do start hiring people in that will then start making more money than existing employees, people that have been loyal to us for 10 years, okay? When that happens, then the pay band collapses on itself, meaning you've got a lot of things going on, and it takes me equitizing, meaning you might get the midpoint increase, but I'm going to have to give you a little bit more to make your pay band more competitive. So in this scenario, for example, if you all said, hey, we want to pick and choose pay band 2, pay band 3 in this employee group, let's say auxiliary, it can be done. But at some point, in order to maintain the health of our pay structure, we would have to consider a massive equitization. But I have been able, even to get us to this point, we've phased that over the years. So we didn't equitize a whole pay group over the years. Instead, we'd say let's equitize pay group 2 or pay group through 3, and usually in the areas of most critical need, right? So that can be done. We would write a phased plan to address that. But again, we're so close against our salary review year that we could probably tolerate it for a year or two.
And we all know to get those teachers and to have our graduates come back and work as we would love to see happen, it's just they can't afford to live here with their salary. So just keep that in mind. And one last thing, do you think that these districts that are hiring third-party custodian companies, Airmark, et cetera, are they still having the same shortages as everybody else doing it themselves, do you think?
So just so that you are aware, we are doing that here. We don't have enough manpower, but neither do our contractors. And so the work still has required that we continue to revisit our 24,000 square feet to 1 for custodial services in our buildings. We never opened a school since I've been here at capacity with auxiliary staff. We've never added auxiliary staff when we open a new school. We continue to pull from other campuses. That was part of our move to centralize the service because we operate at a point that we triage. So if there's a significant need at a campus, we pull from all the campuses and deploy a team. That's how we're managing things right now. But at the secondary, we have a lot of help coming in from contracted services. And I'm going to tell you, and Wes is my witness, it's a very expensive solution. Okay.
While we're having this discussion, I just took a look and looked up Judson, and one of the reasons they gave out a very large raise last year was they had 100 openings for teachers in their district, and yeah, they're double our size roughly. That would be us having the equivalent of 50 open jobs. We did not have 50 open jobs. As the school year began, I think we had 2 or 3. So they really put it out on the line, and they're also running a $25 million deficit. So, I mean, these districts are making these decisions, which are short-term decisions, and I'm going to wonder, I think they're banking on the state raising the basic allotment. And when the state finally gets around to raising the basic allotment, which we hope they do, they should have done it this year. They didn't. They do it in next year. We will be the beneficiary of that, and they'll use the money to close their budget gaps. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that if some of these districts show any sense of fiscal responsibility, whatever we do will be good compared to them. And if and when the basic allotment does get increased, we can be back to where we were a few years ago. Just hope springs eternal.
Couple things. So, one, just my 2 cents, just looking at all the numbers, we're just behind across the board, whatever. So to me, that says also keep management on the HR side. Under our neighbors. Now, I did have one question because we had please forgive me if I remember it exactly, but we had basically a plus up that wasn't really permanent, but we had it for a while. So where are we at on what bus drivers get paid? It's no kidding, flat out, this is their contract versus anything anymore.
So what our plus up was is we did do a $2 for them at one point, but that became part of their annual salary. Yeah, we didn't take that away from them. This is no kidding. Yep, exactly. It's yes, sir. Right. Right. Mr. Stahl and I were discussing today. Fredericksburg is at 27, Comfort 25. Our starting pay for those folks is $16 an hour.
How are we on?
No incentives to bring them in. None of that. Sir?
I was wondering, we talk about the drivers a lot, but how are we on that?
Don't jinx me. We're full. Yeah. But what happens is I'm having to pull my 4 mechanics in lead to drive buses twice a day. So they lose at least 4.5 hours of time of mechanic work. So then what does that mean? We have to send stuff out. And what does that mean? It takes longer to fix it.
Are we paying them mechanic wage when they're bus driving?
They make their regular wage, yeah. Mm-hmm. The only group that does not make their regular wage is when I have to pull coaches. And just for transparency, it is getting, I've had to, this past year, pay $50 an hour to drive a bus. Anybody want to apply today?
So I know we're not making any decisions, President, but just, we share our opinion, just restating, like I said, I'm open to something a little more aggressive than we have in the past. I'm open to, obviously, no decision.
I would agree with that. And that's what I meant when I said we can be creative, that we don't have to treat all the positions with the same kind of pay increase. We can really focus on those that are hard to recruit. The other question I had was, retention bonuses are great, but I'm wondering, because, when I first got on the board a number of years ago, I did not see the number, I don't recall seeing the number of resignations during the middle of the year. Usually when people sign on, they sign up for the year, and that's really not the way it is anymore. So I'm wondering, as part of our strategy for next year, let's say we do a nice jump to bus drivers and custodians, et cetera, et cetera. and they make it through the full year, at the end of the school year, that's when you get a retention bonus for having been there for the full year, so that we don't have a situation, because, you could hire 3 or 4 bus drivers, and then if you lose 2, you've only gained 1, and we need 10. So is that a possibility of something we could consider?
Absolutely is, and there's several models that you can implement to incentivize staying in a district, right? So if you stay so many months, so many years, you can adjust for that, and then obviously never front-ending an incentive for any type of incentive. You make sure that it's given after the fact. I'll just be transparent with you all. We gave mid-year incentives this past several years, and without fail, I have people that we announce we're going to do it, and they submit their resignation, they pick up their check, and then they resign. We have folks that we know, hey, I put my resignation in for, January 31st. Well, you let me know you're resigning, you're not getting that incentive. And we've had to go to blows with people because they believe that they were entitled to a retention incentive, yet they had already notified us of resignation. So really, as far as keeping people in the district, I think that's it's not necessarily the most effective way to retain staff. It's a little bit different when you're thinking about hourly people, because again, when there's no pay for merit, that is something that is more attractive to be able to work towards goals of certain types of incentive.
Seems to me that we would really try to focus more on base salary versus the retention. I mean, it benefits the teachers, everyone in the long run from a retirement standpoint. And it certainly takes away those gotchas of leaving in the middle of the year or two. So somebody else was going to.
No, I was just very insightful what you said about the drivers with Fredericksburg. I think that's an eye-opening there. We knew we need drivers, but if you could put together like a little chart with drivers with the surrounding districts too, and maybe even add VIA to that.
Okay, but realistically, the average VIA driver is making over $30 an hour.
Oh, well, that's good to know too.
Okay.
So that's where they're going to
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
I'd be happy to include that. There's transportation has done a lot with regard to watching these markets, and to speak to Joe's pointing out. Remember, 3 years ago, you gave me permission to take transportation to its own band because we knew that this was coming, and that was exclusively so that if we decided we needed to do something special, that it would not disrupt the entire pay groups.
Are they just looking for part-time jobs, or are they looking for full-time jobs? I guess I'm trying to
Yeah,
decipher how
so
many
again,
hours.
that's going to be back to most of our drivers only want to work no more than the 6 hours a day. We actually this year implemented 4-hour positions, and I still have people that don't even want to work the 4 hours. They only want to do one route, which I continue to advocate for. But other things that we've done to make it more attractive is we've allowed our transportation workers to accept part-time positions in food service during lunches. So they help serve kids, or they help clean up cafeterias in between their routes. So they're working a full 8 hours or 7.5 hours a day. We will make that and continue to make that available. I have yet to have one to say I want to be a custodian and then be a bus driver. But if I do, I'm going to get a t-shirt made for them because that's amazing. I believe right now I'm at 3 bus drivers that took us up on that.
Are they getting paid the same when they're working?
Yeah, I'm not differentiating because it's just too difficult. One, to switch them time in, time out, and 2, our goal is to keep them, right? So now we're not paying them out of the transportation budget. That many of those folks are getting something coded out of food service. But,
We should get an extra bonus.
well, to be able to offer that job variation, and again, that's something we can think about even for custodials, is maybe adjusting shifts so that it's a little more attractive to moms and dads who have babies that can't come in the middle of the night, but maybe, so those are a lot of areas to explore, but they will not solve the issue that those staff struggle financially.
Obviously nothing to bank on, but my
In that,
First and last of the district everything.
in that same vein, if we could see a chart maybe as far as where like the stipends are around us for spec ed and dual language and that sort of thing, and how we compare to that, it'd be good to know.
I like focusing on the stipends. The only other thing I'd just underline, one thing that Carlin said, I think we can use whatever tools we have available. I'm not real anxious to use any type of bonus tools anymore. We did it when budgets were lean. It got us through, be able to put something in pockets, but it's not a long-term solution. I think it's also not us being able to commit to the teachers that they will figure out the budget, staff, figure out a way to get to a raise.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Kind of heard Joe's consensus. Looking around and I see nods that kind of got some.
What is our, the custodial, what are they?
They fall in AU01, so starting 13, and I believe it goes up to 16 there. On average, they're below that. They're below $14 on average across the board.
And you gave us the $2.
Yes, ma'am. You have the $2 in your spreadsheets there.
Maritza, it's on this one. Any other questions or comments? All right, then I think we will wrap up the budget workshop. It is 6:27 and we will consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you very much.